Good evening. Welcome to the Bee Formless Flow-Driven CEO podcast. And I'm excited because I can say good evening because we are on the same time zone, Cam, Craig, and myself. Welcome, Cam, to the pod.
Thank you very much for having me, B, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to wherever people may be.
Yeah, it's really funny. We've been various people that I've been talking to around the world, and you're in Sydney and I'm in Melbourne. We've been talking about this thing around, when I'm talking to someone in the US, they're in the past, I'm in the future, and then we're in the present. And so we're in this present moment right now. And I quite like that analogy, but we're both in the present, so to speak, on the spot here, right here, right now. But I am pretty damn excited to chat to you because my oh my, have you got some stories? And you are a seasoned communication strategist and a storyteller with over 2 decades of experiences shaping narratives of some of the world's most iconic brands, like to name a few, Apple, Amazon, Visa, PayPal, and Yahoo. And I won't share how you started, where your career started, because we'll leave that one for you to talk about. But and then the other big one, which I just asked you before, saying, is that true? When have you really, worked with this particular person? But these two people are like they're just global names that everyone recognizes and knows. So I'll hand it over to you to tell us about your remarkable career, what where it started, and then actually what you're doing now.
Okay, well, thanks again, B. I grew up here in Sydney. That's where I'm located tonight. And throughout my teenage years, I loved to write. I wrote for what they called fanzines back in the day, sort of music blogs, if you like. And then I started writing for teen magazines, lifestyle publications, um, you name it. Even when I was in high school, I even got paid for it, believe it or not. People used to actually pay you for writing articles. Can you believe it?
No.
Um, I also played in a band, and we got paid for that too sometimes, but more often than not than in beer or some small change. But I love music, I love writing, and I guess if you had asked me when I was 16 or 17 what I wanted to do, it probably had something involving music and writing.
Mm, music and writing. And so your career began as a tour publicist, is that right?
It got to that. Look, I just after school, I wrote to someone in the music industry at the time who had a small public relations shop, and I asked if I could come in during my school holidays and just, help out, do some work experience, as we called it, not getting paid, just observing what was going on. And I did that. And then after I finished high school, I contacted the person again, and they invited me to work for them. And I just learnt the ropes doing the job, if you
Mm.
like. And then after about 2 years, I guess I got a little bit cocky, and I loved Johnny Cash, the country musician that
I love
some
Johnny Cash too.
Johnny Cash, the Man in Black, the country singer. And I guess a lot of music journalists in Sydney knew that I liked him too. And one of these journalists said to me one day, we were talking about something else, you know that Johnny Cash is coming to Sydney. You should do the PR for it. And I thought, of all the reasons why I couldn't do it, 22, the firm really didn't do music touring PR. It was more the business of music. There's a whole host of reasons why, like, there's no way that I could ever do this. But I thought, let's be bold and write to the promoter and see what happens. And I think initially it was a no. They'd had a bad experience with someone who really liked another performer. I believe that performer was Barry Manilow, believe it or not. And I think they made a fool out of themselves, so they're a bit hesitant to give the job to another fan. And I said, no, 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 I'll be very well behaved and what have you. And it grew into a meeting between the promoter and I at a Sydney hotel, which was just fascinating stuff when you're 22, right? Like just,
100%.
you know, thinking what can I bring to the table here? But I really knew about a lot about Johnny Cash, and I could see that here was this guy that I really loved as a teenager, and I definitely was the anomaly at the time, but I thought he had so much to offer people of my generation. And it so turned out that over the next 10 years or so, he would really record his finest legacy with a producer called Rick Rubin, who worked with the Red Hot
Yeah.
Chili Peppers and the
Yeah.
Beastie Boys, and maybe not the Beastie Boys, but rap bands and heavy metal bands and what have you. And he became, another star of the MTV generation. So it's funny how things turned out. But anyway, they gave me a chance and ended up doing two tours of Australia and New Zealand with Johnny Cash. And then that led to tours with Willie Nelson and other people down the track. But just a wonderful experience that left me kind of thinking, this is great. What am I going to do the rest of my life? I kind of like hit the peak there.
And
So
at 22, like, were you shitting yourself in any way, shape, or form, going, what have I got myself into? You talked about this need to be bold, right? And it was almost like, just going for it. Was there anything in you that was like like fearful of actually just going for it, or you were just like, you know what, this is an opportunity? Like at 22, I think about, at 22 years of age, we have so many limitations that we quite often put on ourselves, but you just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for this. This is a passion.
I think the only thing that I was afraid of was messing it up, and messing it up being too much of a fan person, you know. So I was very careful to not do that. But if you ask me what I was to do again, I'd probably say be a little bit more relaxed and actually,
Mm,
be a vocal fan as well as doing a professional job. I don't think anything's wrong with that.
mm.
But I was just determined sort of not to mess it up. So there I was picking up John and June, his wife, from Sydney Airport, and he's running around getting a Mars bar, and I'm trying to be all professional. But I wish that I'd kind of been a bit more relaxed. It was pretty hard because this guy was like my the biggest music legend of all time for me. Um, but no, I'd read his autobiography. I borrowed it from my school library. I think I borrowed it 5 or 6 times. It's probably still at the library with my name on it somewhere. But I knew his story. I loved the music, and what was fascinating too is that John was completely clean of drugs and alcohol by that time, and the only time that he didn't experience pain, he had a botched operation that happened during the service in Germany on his jaw, and the only time he didn't feel pain was when he was performing or when he was praying. So he brought out his reverend from the USA, and I got talking with that reverend and actually got him on the equivalent of Good Morning America here, which was the largest audience he'd ever had. So, as the hook being that he was Johnny Cash's reverend coming out here to Australia. So anyway, it was just fun times. Learned a lot. And, beyond just the content and working with Johnny Cash and doing a music project and blah, 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 it was that fact that what is stopping you from asking for something?
Mm.
If you never ask for something, you'll never know whether you're going to get it or not. And
Yeah.
it turns out, out of all the people that probably could have done that job, I had a different perspective than other people. And I think they liked that. And I was able to bring new ideas to the table. I was able to bring new pairings of people to the table. And, it was just amazing.
Oh my God, there's a couple of things going on for me there. Have you ever heard that saying, if you don't ask, you don't get? Yeah, so I kind of really relate to that in what you're talking about. Like, it's almost like if you don't go for it, you won't get it, sort of thing, right? And then the other part of this is that you, at 22 years of age, and at any age really, you have this opportunity to get that fresh perspective through that beginner's mindset. Like, it's almost like, you're a storyteller, right? It's like you're looking at this pen, for example. What is this pen? What is it? And coming in with that fresh perspective. Is that, in terms of how you were writing your stories and crafting your stories, and like, where were you getting your inspo from, or was it just that you were thinking about things differently? Like, how did you come up with these hooks, and kind of what you were writing for, and doing all the PR for Johnny Cash at the time?
Look, I loved at that time, more alternative kind of music, and I could see the marriage of the two. So I guess that's what inspired me. And I think the secret to PR is unlikely combinations of two things often,
Mm.
right? So it's kind of
Divergent.
like it's so obvious, but it's not so obvious.
Yeah.
What's the number one work perk that employees want? Is it treadmill desks? Is it free food? No, it's natural light. That would become like another milestone in my PR career years later. A very obvious insight, but the two things coming together, is kind of unexpected and it became
Mm.
a water cooler conversation. So you look for those moments.
Mm.
And I don't know how to teach people like how to think like that yet. I do want to do that.
Mm.
I think it just takes an innate curiosity that,
Mm.
a lot of 22-year-olds and younger and older still have. And there's nothing stopping anyone from doing things like that.
No, it's that innate curiosity, and also like for me, and you may agree or you may disagree, but it's like, how do you harness that intuition, those nuggets that drop for you? And how do you like, there's that whole intuition, and, there's a whole thing, research piece they're doing at the moment on accessing flow state where you are at your most creative. And how do you work that intuition together? And I think you can't teach that, but you can also, I think, help people or guide people in terms of how to access that intuition, and then what do you do with it? What do you do with those fresh thoughts that come through to you? And then how do you apply them to solve, problems, or to write stories, or, create those conversation starters? So talk me through then how your career continued and progressed, and, with some of the big brands that you were working across, and there's one other big person that, yeah, you worked with as well. And then also, I didn't say at the start how you started your own company as a co-founder of a signature story. How did that all come together?
Okay. All right. So maybe I'll attack this chronologically. After the two tours of Johnny Cash and a whole bunch of other stuff that I did at this company, I felt like that was it. And I think, probably like some Australians today too, although I mean, Australia is much more of an international place than what it used to be. I had that desire and that hunger to see the world and
Mm,
to venture out.
travel. Mm.
Yeah, so I did, and I went away for a year and a half or so to North America, and then came back and thought I'm at that age where I really should get a real job. And I worked for Porter Novelli, one of the biggest
Yeah,
PR
I know them.
firms. And it so happened that Apple was their client at the
Mm.
time. And Apple was this struggling company that Steve Jobs had just come back to the company that he founded. But they had this just woeful product mix. And the only people who used Macs at the time were school districts and some creatives. Even the hardcore, artists, creative types had given up on Apple and were switching to Windows. So it was a pretty bleak time that if you'd asked anyone, would they even survive 5 years, let alone come back in the way that they did? No one would have guessed it. But I don't know. I'm kind of like this eternal fan. I love
Sounds
artists,
like it.
their bad periods and their good periods. I'm very tragic in that way. And I felt that way with Apple. I felt that way about Johnny Cash too. I didn't like
Yeah,
everything,
so
but I knew that he inherently, it was awesome. And I felt that about Apple too. So, and I love that kind of PR challenge of like, you think that you know something, let me give you a fresh perspective on
Mm,
it.
I love
And
that.
look at this not for what it is, look at this for the sign of what may come, you know,
Mm,
and that's what a lot of the early days of Apple PR was like. Anyway, to kind of cut to the chase, I ended up moving again. This time I moved to Singapore, joined another PR agency, won Apple as the client for Southeast Asia.
well
And,
done.
and then Apple invited me to move in-house with them in Singapore, and I became the head of Asia Pacific comms for them for a number of years as they were releasing the iPod and a lot of the groundbreaking technologies that would, be the first fruits of their turnaround. And then eventually, after about 3 years, I was invited to come to Cupertino, California, the mothership, and joined the product PR team. And out of all the teams at Apple, that was the team to be in. It wasn't really so much Apple tackling the issues of the day and, environmental issues and all of that type of thing. They were just about selling products, and that's where the fun was. So it seemed like every 3 months, in fact, it really was about every 3 months, we would just create products that just changed whole product categories or just new products in general, right? And it was just like that for years and years and years. And I crisscrossed the United States. I went to pretty much every keynote that Steve Jobs did for about 10 years,
Wow.
including ones in France and Japan. So I'm sure that some people have been to a lot of the ones in the US. I went to absolutely all of them and worked at them. And it was like a masterclass. And I kind of thought at that age, right, that the rest of the world is like this. I thought this is just typical. When you join like a big company like this is just normal. Um, but that was just my experience. I didn't realize that other people operated in other ways. So it was just a fascinating time, and I'm still friends today with a lot of the people from those days.
Yeah, wow. Like you've seen it all really, haven't you, in terms of like from I mean, across PR, but like just the music industry to then tech to creativity and like how they all kind of also merge together as well. Like if I think about Apple and the way they've applied tech, design, music, and yet all your experiences and bringing them all together. Is that what was that like for you in terms of is that where did you get all your fresh perspective from when you were in those in the Apple environment? Was it that you were around this constant state of flow state where everyone was completely just performing at their best? It was almost like a collective team, or like how did you get that inspiration?
Well, it was a high performing team in the
Mm,
true sense, and they would never would have called themselves a high performing team.
mm,
But the attention to detail and the attention to quality was
mm,
second to none.
mm,
And here I am, like I'm from Sydney, I'm there in California. I'm inherently an introvert, and here I am, like trying to get my voice heard in these, meetings
mm.
with quite vocal
People.
people.
Mm,
But I just had to remember why they'd hired me. And the reason that they hired me is they saw the future. At that time, most of their sales were from North America, and they could see that international would be the key for them in the future. Believe it or not, I mean, it sounds so obvious, doesn't it? But it wasn't.
mm,
They're just focused on North America. People have said to them, "What about
mm.
China? What about this?" And it was like, when the time comes, we'll do that. But to change operating systems and software into other languages from scratch just takes a long time.
Yeah,
And they brought out this Mac OS 10, which was a completely new operating system, what have you. It just takes a while to build things like that.
yeah.
And I was the international guy, so it was I wasn't doing my job unless I gave my opinion. So I kind of pushed myself to interact in what was unnatural situations for me, and I think it brought out the best in me. And
Mm,
after a while, people would just sort of pause and say, "What do you think?" But only after a long time of building their trust.
mm,
Look, it was an amazing time, and from a PR level, we did so many things differently. I really don't think that my boss got the credit that she deserves in history for doing what she did. She never got sort of the PR Week Hall of Fame award or anything like that, but I know what she did and the pressure that she was under
mm.
and the relationships that she built up with journalists. So I had the good fortune of learning from some of the best in the world.
Yeah. And was it relentless in there, Cam? I nearly called you Craig then, by the way.
Yeah, no problem.
My brother's called Craig. But Cam, was it relentless in terms of if you think about today and the world we're living in, and there's just obviously this relentless pursuit of, busyness and hustle, and you come from a creative background and PR, and I come from an advertising background, and it's 24/7 when you're on, and like it's just this go, 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 go. Was it like that in that sort of an organization? Was it hardcore? Was there any rest? Was there any time for being able to actively recover so that you could get those fresh perspectives? Like, what was that like in terms of an environment?
Yeah, we tend to run to deadlines. Sometimes an event would be the forcing function of of whether something's going to be ready or not. But I'd also say the attention to quality was second to none, as I said before. So
Mm,
we would never put out a product that wasn't quite
mm,
ready for the market.
mm,
But yeah, there was moments of rest after an event, after a launch, after you'd been on the road for 2 weeks doing the reviews
mm,
tours and what have you. You'd eventually get a time to
mm,
rest. But
mm,
it wasn't for the faint-hearted. I ran really hard, and the reason why I even, left Apple was I needed to get back closer to Sydney. My parents were getting older, and
mm,
Christmas time was the busiest time of the year because
mm,
they're leading up to all the big product launches they have in January. It's a very busy time in the US,
mm.
whereas in Australia, it's like people just take 2 months off.
I know.
So I got quite jealous of that. And also, I just wanted to be close to my parents. I ended up moving back to Singapore. And I joined Yahoo working in what they called emerging markets, which was everywhere from India to Africa to the Middle East, to you name it, which definitely was another form of busyness, and various other companies over the years, and then eventually I moved back to the States. It was quite the ride, and about 3 or 4 years ago, moved back to Sydney during the pandemic in November 2020.
Wow, what a time to move back. How did you, I've got a couple of questions before we jump into now and what you're doing right now. But okay, first question. Have you ever read the book, The Psychology of Money by Martin Hasseldorf?
No, I have not.
Okay, it's a really interesting book. And in one of the chapters, he talks about luck versus risk. And I think you'd actually really like this book. And it's got a story around Bill Gates, and in that, and how he established obviously his business and the two other partners. And I won't go into it, but they talk about this luck versus risk. In terms of your career, you've had some amazing successes and experiences in terms of the caliber of, these global stars you've worked with. Do you see that as and this is not a loaded question, it's just a question based on this book I've read, and I think about it more now in the psychology of money, but do you see that as that was for you a moment in time that you just happened to be there and the opportunity presented itself, or do you see that it was a form of luck that you were able to come across these opportunities?
No, I don't see it as luck. I thought about what I really liked
Mm,
in life. Things like, Johnny Cash and
mm,
music and Apple.
mm,
I bought Apple products. I knew Apple. I knew all about what the
mm.
company was up against. So I was an expert in this field, which wasn't very popular at the time.
Yeah,
So by the time that I was interviewing with Apple, I was able to talk about my experience in Sydney,
yeah.
the Think Different time, my experience in Asia with the agency. I had a whole story to tell,
Mm,
to them. And I still look, I still do this today. A lot of people just don't take the time to, try and make introductions, to try and reach out to
mm.
people. And if they do, they kind of go straight to, I need a job, or,
Yeah,
I need your opinion on my
yeah.
paper. It's always a demand. And if you reach out to people and you actually offer them something, quite often they appreciate it and they might give you something in return.
Mm,
If you just make an ask, most of the time you won't get a response or you'll get a no.
yeah.
I just inherently am like that. I'm still like that today when it comes to finding clients or when I'm doing research, for studying or whatever. I'll reach out to the people that can possibly help me and I'll offer them something,
Mm.
even if it's just a bit of storytelling about Apple or whatever it might be. And I think that really makes a difference.
I love that. I love that about you in terms of just that, that always, giving value back, it's paying it forward, right? Like you're not just demanding something yourself. So,
Well, sorry, just on that point, Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, it's good.
I think sometimes, like, I just put my cynics hat on, kind of going, okay, looking at this person, yeah, he was all right. He was there at the right time with Apple or whatever. all right for him to kind of wax lyrical about, all of this. I'll give you another example of it.
Mm.
Someone reached out to me a few years ago
Yeah.
and they said, "Can you be my mentor?" And they were a PR student, if you liked. And I had a look at their profile and what they did. And and we had a discussion and I was like, "What can you offer me?" And she said, "I can translate all of your articles into Chinese and I can set up Weibo accounts and WeChat accounts and all of these social media accounts in China, and I can help you get an audience there." And I went, "Okay, deal." So here's a person, again, 22, 23, and she's offered me something that I could never have possibly got on my own and opened me up to a whole new world. But how many people just don't do that? They go straight for the I want something. Think about what it is that you do. Chances are that, it might be some artwork that you do. It might be, a craft that is useful. It might be some volunteer work you do. You have something to offer people. And when you think like that, some really good things can happen.
I love that. And I'm glad I asked you that question because there was nothing, there was nothing in it, but I wanted to, I love your response to it in terms of just the way you've reflected and looked at it because I think a lot of the time people do judge or they do go, he was just lucky. And do you know what I mean? Or she was just lucky with how she's where it's taken her. And the book is super fascinating because it does make you like look at things differently. But the fact that, yeah, I think everyone's got a lot to offer and a lot a lot of value. And I think, I think COVID caused a lot of, we could go down a COVID rabbit hole, but we won't. But it caused a lot of us to become more insular is the wrong word, but it was all about I, and it's kind of like, how do we get back into helping each other and, being the best we possibly can as well. So tell us about what's happening now for you, because it sounds like you've done a full, is it 720 or a 360? And
Yeah,
where
look,
your career started and now where you are, I
yeah.
just think it's incredible.
So look, I came back during that time in the thick of COVID when we were under lockdown and we were doing hotel quarantine and all of those things, which
Gosh.
I won't go into detail on. Um, but I ended up, I thought it might take me a while to get a job here because I hadn't worked in Australia for 25 years or something. And actually got a job reasonably quickly. I was at a great job too. I was the head of communications for Amazon, AWS in
Oh,
Australia and New
yeah.
Zealand. So I definitely, first 3 years of coming back, extremely busy, whirlwind trips to the US and other places, and working with another high performing team and a
Love
really
that.
demanding company that's very, very country, customer centric, as you know. But look, I did that for 3 years, and I thought, combined with that and the other companies that I've worked for in the US and Asia, what am I really looking for? I've done the big company route. It's time to do
Mm.
something different. So I've started my own consultancy. It's called A Signature Story, and I work with clients on their strategic communications needs. I can help with messaging. I can help them tell their company story. I can, help them with whatever direction they need in communications. Turns out most of my clients are actually international clients, so I do work the different time zones
Yeah.
of
Fun.
America and Europe. But I'm open to taking, clients in Australia or anywhere for that matter too. So I'm doing that. And then also one of the things that sometimes in job interviews, we would always come up towards the end. It'd be like, what school did you go to? And I'd
Oh.
embarrassingly have to say, I never went to university. I just went into the school of work experience and just getting started, like I mentioned before. So I've actually signed up to go to university. I'm doing a Master of Strategic Communication at the University of Technology in Sydney, and that's quite demanding. And I'm here with, students a lot younger than me, a lot of them starting out in their communications careers, some of them with experience, a lot of them from overseas. So the potential of learning about, the countries where they're from is tremendous. But it's very much an even playing field of, I have a few war stories, but a lot of the theory is quite new to me. So in some ways, it's like reinventing yourself yet again.
I love that. You sound like you've continuously shaped, reshaped, and this continuous like curiosity and always wanting to remain fresh in terms of like fresh perspectives, that fresh storytelling. I feel like we could keep chatting forever. In terms of what are you noticing in the younger generation? Like you've been around for a few generations, as have I, in terms of, and we've obviously got however many generations in the world and, in market at the moment. What have you observed going back to uni? Anything in particular that is different to when, for example, you were a 22-year-old self? Like, have you noticed much difference?
I actually think that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And
Yeah.
that's really annoyed some younger people, probably. I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't annoy them. But the example is like new technologies, like AI,
Yeah.
when I was 22, it was the internet. I'm sorry, but like it was the internet. My whole career kind of grew from the internet. And it used to be this very slow and expensive thing, and now it becomes something that's just second nature to us all. And I feel like that's happening with AI. And I feel like that's the opportunity for
Mm,
people just getting started, that it really hasn't been defined yet.
no.
And you're going to be like everyone else and just look up every university assignment, every client, like you're going to just chat to AI to get your answer. Or are you gonna, really find out the intrinsic value of this thing and be a leader in that and still have your own original thought? I think that there's two paths to go on that.
Mm,
I'll leave it for someone else to go down that path, but I think therein lies the opportunity, just like it did back in the day, of you can consume, the latest Hollywood gossip on the internet, or you can do, many groundbreaking things that brought people together when they wouldn't have had opportunities to do so otherwise.
yeah, I love that. And for me, that feels like it's coming back to that authenticity, right? That authentic storytelling. And how do you tell a story or communicate in an authentic way? I asked you a question I've got a question for people that are signing on to or, booking into the pod. And the question was, and I need to find it now. Where was it? Where was it? It was around, I was asking you around if you had one insight you could share with us in terms of whether it was in life, leadership, or business. And you said that anyone can be an influencer. I feel like it's quite timely that I'm asking this question now, given what we've just been talking about briefly. But can you share or elaborate on what you meant by that, please?
Yeah, by that I mean, and again, like it's for the cynics that sort of say, oh, you had the Apple and you had this. But look, I didn't always work for companies like that. I
Mm.
worked for one company, Polycom, who actually pretty amazing. They invented that triangle-shaped conference phone that you still see
Oh,
today.
yes.
And the founder, I met at a Bring Your Kids to Work day on my first day at work. And he was talking to this bunch of 10, 11-year-old kids, and they were all listening to him. And I thought, how's he holding their attention? I have, had kids that were a similar age at the time. And he was talking about how back in the day, he bought this 99-cent book from Radio Shack, which was a do-it-yourself electronics store. And essentially, he read this book on building speakers for 99 cents, and essentially it became this $2 billion company, Polycom. And I thought, how could this company have been going for 25, 30 years or however long it had been going for? And I didn't know that story. So I sat down with him and we sort of created an article, and we got that article in Wired magazine. And everyone thought it was fantastic in Silicon Valley, this great story. Then I thought, Polycom customers, do they really read Wired magazine? A lot of them are government customers and corporations and what have you. I don't know. So we rewrote the article and got it in Harvard Business Review. But the point of it is that there was probably 12, 15, 18 PR people before me doing that job. And not one of them had picked up on this story. So who knows what's lurking in yourself, in your company, your business. Um, these stories, a lot of them never ever get told,
Mm.
and they're really interesting. They're Harvard Business Review quality, interesting.
Yeah. And so
What's working in your closet?
yeah, I love that. But so what is your advice then that you give to your clients in the company you're in, your own company now? Like what sort of advice do you give them? Like if they come to you and obviously looking for your services, like do you have like like what is the advice you would give anyone coming to you? Yeah,
Yeah, I'd start with the basics and say to them, why don't you pick 3 to 5 people that you know? Some of them might be quite close to you. Some of them might interact with you on a regular basis. Some of them might do business with you. And ask them what is interesting about you. And before you do that, write down what you think is interesting about you. And I can almost guarantee them that their answer is going to be very different from the other 5 people. And I think when you look at that very, very simple exercise, you can kind of come up with, you often unearth a lot of those stories that I've just talked about, and you can sort of lighten up a person to really be their true authentic self and tell the stories that are going to resonate with audiences around the world.
I love that. I absolutely love it. And I've had that someone asked me to do that years ago, and I did it myself. And I went to my clients. It was a coach at the time, a business coach, and she asked me to do that. And it did. It like I was just like there was like 5 different perspectives, and then I had to do it as well. It's very profound, and like you say, it kind of just opens this new light and comes back to what you've been talking about all along here, is that the possibilities are endless when it comes to storytelling and how you craft them. So Cam, how do we find out more about you? How do we find out more about Signature Story? How do we get in touch with you?
You just go to asignaturestory.com or look me up on LinkedIn at a signature story or Cameron Craig. Easy as that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I've loved our chat, and I could keep asking you more and more questions, but I'll leave you to have a lovely evening. But no, thank you, Cam. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, B, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.